Good morning. Thank you for joining us. My name is Erica Thomas. I'm the Public Information Office Manager for the Lincoln Police Department. Today we are going to share more details surrounding the in-custody death that occurred in the area of South 54th and Meredith Streets in Southeast Lincoln on Sunday. You will hear from Police Chief Michonne Morrow. Please hold your questions until the end of her prepared statement. Chief.
Good morning. The Lincoln Police Department is investigating after a man took his own life while in police custody, and it is a standard practice for incidents of this nature that we are handling that investigation. On Sunday, November 9th, around 8 p.m., officers responded to a disturbance at a home in the area of South 54th and Meredith Streets in Southeast Lincoln. 45-year-old Elazar Oseguera of Lincoln was reported to be having a mental health crisis. When officers arrived, he was attempting to enter a home through a basement window. Oseguera was handcuffed and placed into custody. He was searched by officers before being placed in the back of a cruiser. And I do have images that I want to share with you to help walk through what this looked like. So this is an image taken immediately after he is taken into custody. As you can see, he has his hands behind his back and officers have applied handcuffs. This is after we have walked to the cruiser, still clearly in handcuffs, and they are going to begin the search process of his person. So you can see here on this side, this officer it's on his right side, is beginning a search on the right side of his body. On the left side of his body, you can see here that there is a pocket out because we have searched that area of his person, again, after he had been placed in handcuffs and was at the cruiser. This is a little bit harder to see, but we are down at his feet at this point in time, and we are checking the sock and shoe area on the pant side of his legs. Here we highlighted, you can see that we actually pulled the sock out to make sure that there was nothing inside of the sock. And this is, we're going down to the other side of his legs, and then I think we have one more where you can see that we've actually pulled his pant leg up so we could visualize and see his leg at that point in time, but trying to ensure that he didn't have anything that he had tucked away in his socks, lower part of his pants, or his shoes, before placing him in the back of the cruiser. After he was placed in the back of the cruiser, the officers began interviewing witnesses, including a woman who drove up to the scene and was known to Oseguera, and they were evaluating the need to place the man into emergency protective custody. It was during that time that he used a firearm that was in his possession to shoot himself around 8:45 p.m. He was able to move his hands that were handcuffed behind him to the front of his body, where he pulled the firearm from inside his pants. And again, have some more photos taken from body-worn camera to show you what this looks like. So this photo here, per our policy, that's okay. They're actually double locking those handcuffs per our policy, but they're behind his back as he's sitting in there. We do that as if they lean back on them, it creates pressure. If they're not double locked, it can close the handcuffs even further, causing discomfort and sometimes cut off circulation. So we double lock those to prevent that from occurring. And here he is in the back. You can see his hands are behind him, handcuffed as he's seated in the cruiser. And then this is the process that he takes as he is working his arms, again, hands still handcuffed to the front side of his body. That was a little bit harder, but he is now about at his feet. There we go, that's a clearer picture. As he's maneuvering his arms to the front side of his body. Okay. And here's our final one. And the final image that we wanted to show you here, this is the firearm that he was able to locate on his body that officers had missed in the search. And that's the only photo that we're going to show you that he had it in his hand at that point in time. So despite immediate life-saving efforts by our officers, they had immediately pulled him out of the cruiser where they started rendering aid. and our partners with Lincoln Fire and Rescue arrived on scene, ultimately transported to the hospital where medical professionals still continued to work on him, and he eventually passed away at 9:30 p.m. Our thoughts are with his loved ones during this difficult time. We're very grateful that no officers were injured during this call for service, or any of our community members, such as the home that he was trying to enter, or the female who stopped by and we were interviewing in very close proximity to the cruiser. The officer whose cruiser in which this occurred has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of our investigation, as is required by LPD general orders. Some of the general orders that I want to talk about just very briefly with you. General Order 1540. That addresses search of persons and vehicles. It is not public facing, and we have not faced that publicly due to it containing investigatory processes that we believe with public knowledge could impede the effectiveness of our ability to conduct investigations and potentially jeopardize officer safety. But I will share a few elements of that policy with you. What that policy says is officers may search people in multiple circumstances, including when someone is taken into custody. The scope of that search is to include their persons, including a frisk and examination of pockets, baggage, or other items in their possession. The officers in this instance followed policy by handcuffing and searching Oseguera, including double locking, but unfortunately missed this gun. General Order 1550 is public facing, talks about the use of handcuffs, which again is available on our public homepage. The officers followed policy by placing him in handcuffs behind the back, palms out, and double locked. We will not be releasing video. That video is a video of a man where it took his own life. And our thoughts are going to continue to be with the Oseguera family during this horrific tragedy. And it would be incredibly disrespectful to their loved ones to publicize his last moments. He was a son, he was a father and a partner, and he was clearly suffering. It was traumatizing for those officers on scene and would be for anyone who would watch it, and quite frankly, it's simply unnecessary. I've watched the body camera and the cruiser camera several times from this incident, and I can say that our officers treated Oseguera with kindness and patience as they tried to help him by placing him in emergency protective custody with the goal of connecting him to the resources that he needed. We do want to remind the public that various mental health resources are available in the community, including 988 Crisis Lifeline. That's available 24/7. We also do have our co-responders that I will mention that had ended their shift prior to this incident, so they were not available. And with that, I would open it up for any questions that you may have.
How common is it, how difficult is it for a suspect handcuffed like that to actually maneuver his hands to that position?
It's very difficult. We gave you still photos without showing you the video, but he worked very hard to be able to get his hands in front of him. We see it. We don't see it very often, just because it is hard to maneuver in that fashion, but he was able to do so.
So during that, was there anybody that had an eye on the vehicle while he was getting his hands to the front of his body?
Our officer was in and out of the cruiser, on the front seat of the cruiser, had interactions with him. It's dark in the back seat of the cruiser. While you can see that video, that's because we have lighting within that video system that allows that to be captured, but it's dark. He was standing outside, again, in near proximity as he was interviewing the female who came by, as well as having conversations with those that are involved in making the decision to place somebody in emergency protective custody.
How long did it take him to maneuver his cuffs to that position to get the gun, to fire the shot?
You know, that's a question that I don't have the answer to. I didn't look at timestamps of exactly how long that took.
Was it fairly quick, do you think, or unknown?
I'm going to say unknown. I don't want to surmise. I've watched it several times. It's a heavy weight to watch that video. Again, just want to share that, and that's exactly why we will not be publicizing this video. That is unnecessary.
How many officers were responding to this?
We had 2 officers.
So two were there the whole.
Two were there the whole time.
Kind of timeline-wise, I spoke with somebody out in the neighborhood who said he was one of those that called 911. The guy was actually trying to get into his basement. He told me that there were some issues with the dispatch, saying that you guys were really busy at the time, and it took almost 20 to 30 minutes from the time that his wife called 911 to when officers arrived. Can you talk about the timeline of when the original call came in from his wife to when they arrived, and how long it took and why it took so long?
I can, except I don't have that information readily available at this point in time. We can certainly try and look that up while we're here before we end questions, but I don't have that within my ability to share at this point in time.
And in the search, like, did they, in the video you watched, and I don't know if it's clear in the pictures you shared, did the officer, when searching, did he go around the waistband of the pants, or was that just an area he missed on that search?
You know, I'm just not going to get into complete details of the search other than to tell you that they did search him as depicted by the photos, from dumping his pockets, yes, around his body, along the waistband, on his legs. But the investigation is still ongoing, so to release any further information would be getting out ahead of what is an in-custody death and will require a grand jury review.
You mentioned it's LPD's kind of purview to investigate this situation. Can you go into a little bit about why that is and why? Because I know if there's an officer-involved shooting, you bring in another agency that wasn't, involved in that, like LSO or NSP, if LPD was the one that fired a shot. Why in this situation, when there's an in-custody death and an LPD cruiser, is an external investigation not taking place?
I think that's a fair question for us to have a conversation about. In the officer-involved shootings or other incidents where officers took action of a use of force or a use of control that ended up resulting in death, that is an action that they took, and that we do investigate differently in those terms. So in custody deaths, I want you to think about for a moment what all encompasses in custody deaths. Example, we spent hours, and media was there with us, covering of a young woman struggling on an electrical fence, for lack of better, right, structure. And we spent hours with her. And ultimately she made the choice, just like Mr. Oseguera did, and took her own life, just as he did. It wasn't an action or inaction of our officers. Both, in different ways, were doing their best to provide care and concern, to connect to the resources. But it was a choice that was made, unfortunately, by our community members, which is, again, why we are stressing so hard to make sure that if we know of individuals, loved ones, family members who are struggling, that we are all working. It's a community effort. This can't just be on the shoulders of law enforcement, to connect people to resources and to always do what we can to try and prevent these circumstances from happening.
You mentioned that the co-responders or the alternate response program individuals were just getting off of shift, so it happened after they were done for the day. Are you looking at possibly expanding that to have kind of 24 hours coverage? So in these circumstances, there may be a mental health professional that can go out on these calls before it maybe escalates to somebody being placed in handcuffs?
We're always looking at the program and gaining an understanding, as it's still really in the infancy stages of the impact and the positive changes that have been made, and then identifying where growth can occur. We're not ready to make a decision yet on if that will expand in the relative near future of 24/7. Again, I just want to stress that they are an incredible resource for us, and we are finding that they're well received. Our officers appreciate them on calls for service. We see success for our community members. But with that said, I do want to remind our community that our officers are also trained, and they have an understanding of the resources that are available. So having the co-responders for us is a partnership that just continues to benefit. But we will never have enough co-responders based on the number of calls for service of community members struggling to have them at every single call. So we will continue to train our officers to be able to respond appropriately and connect individuals to resources, because that's always going to be a responsibility that we will carry, regardless of having the co-responders with us.
Can you describe what type of gun it was that he used?
I'm going to not touch on that because of the ongoing investigation at this point in time, but I do understand and appreciate the question. I just won't be sharing that today.
Was there any concern about the neighborhood at the time of this incident, where you had to tell neighbors to stay put where they're at, or was it pretty isolated?
No, I mean, it was very isolated. Again, when the officers arrived on scene, this call comes in, and they are making contact with him around 8 p.m. As we learned, because we have someone here that interviewed one of the homeowners, as we did, he was attempting to make entry into the basement of this home. And so that's where we contact him and take him into custody. Without any real incident, he was frustrated in his comments, his behaviors, but I would not say that he was being exceptionally difficult or resisting our officers, which is why I can tell you that taking him into custody was, for us at that point, a non-incident. They were very kind and patient with him as they talked to him and tried to get him to understand why we were placing him into custody. So we didn't have any concern at that point for anyone else in the neighborhood. And again, it's a tragedy beyond measure that when he took his own life, he was in the backseat of a cruiser. So we did not at that point have a concern for anyone else. I just want to say how grateful again I am that none of our officers or community members, the individuals that live in that home, the female that came and stopped and talked with our officers near proximity to the cruiser, and that when he made that decision, he made it a personal choice.
Did he live in the neighborhood, or how did the woman know that he was in custody?
I think she was out looking for him.
The person I spoke to mentioned that the individual was kind of walking behind houses and up and down the sidewalk and ended up on Lowell Street, which is where he said that you guys took him into custody and placed him in the back of the cruiser, and that's kind of where the finale of this incident occurred. Can you confirm that the cruiser and the shooting took place on Lowell Street?
I don't know that I can confirm exactly where that cruiser was placed at that given time.
LPD policy says a person who is cuffed should be supervised, except in special circumstances. Where does this case fall on that spectrum?
Our officer was right outside of the cruiser. This happens very frequently for us when we place somebody in the back of the cruiser. We don't sit in the back seat with them. We check on them, and that happened multiple times. Our officer was interacting and engaging with him. He never left for a long distance. Again, he was always in near proximity to the back of the cruiser, which is why when he makes the decision to take his own life, within a minute, our officer has opened the car door, secured that weapon, pulled him out, and has started life-saving measures.
Where was the other officer at the time of this?
He was still interviewing the homeowners. He was up at the house.
Can you describe at all where the gun was on the dial?
Again, that's a detail that I'm going to withhold at this point, just because we have this continuing investigation occurring, and there will be subsequent actions that will also review it through the county attorney presentation at a grand jury.
When cops are doing a pat-down, are there certain spots that they are not allowed to search on a person?
You know, that's a great question, because I think that there's a learning lesson for everyone in this conversation, including our community members, because very frequently we do get complaints from community members who were upset about areas that we searched when we took somebody into custody. And I will tell you here today that those areas and what occurred is exactly why we do and can.
Can you touch on, I know there was a little bit of frustration on Monday because we didn't get any information until today. Can you go into a little bit about why some, the media's questions kind of went unanswered? You don't have to go into like in depth, like, we know that there's an investigation still going on, but some of the questions seemed like it was just a simple answer. Is there a reason why it took until Wednesday to get either you or Captain Vollmer or another, supervisor to kind of answer some questions?
Well, I appreciate that you are bringing this forward. I will say that there was only one outlet that was asking questions all day on Monday. We had previously said that we were unavailable Monday and Tuesday. So this is not because we were avoiding answering questions. We just couldn't change process of where we were at. I helped write that release that got sent out about 2:30 in the morning and added far more detail on an original release than I think we normally would have, because I understood that we were not going to be available. So this was not because we were being difficult, not because we didn't want to answer the questions, but because we had already clearly indicated that we were not available on Monday and Tuesday. And with the information we had provided, come Monday morning, there would have been very little more for us as that investigation was still unfolding to share with you. And we would still be here today, Wednesday, providing this news conference for all of our partners in the media.
Can you also go into a little bit on why one officer is on leave and not the other one that was with him?
That's a decision that we made simply because at the point in time of Mr. Oseguera taking his own life, the second officer was at the home. So just one officer was at the cruiser, and it was his cruiser.
How long does this admin leave last for?
I appreciate you asking that question because it's going to give me the opportunity to share with you a little bit more why we do administrative leaves. So we have an investigation that is still ongoing with interviews yet to be conducted, evaluation of autopsy and other investigatory records. But in addition, we allow our officers that are involved in these types of incidents a moment in time to decompress. Because if there's anyone out there that does not believe that that's not weighing incredibly heavy on them, they are quite wrong. We hire human beings, just like Mr. Oseguera was an important human being to us. And they were doing what they thought that they could within their power to be able to take him into custody, search him, and get him where he needed to be. So with that, we allow our officers time to be able to decompress. We offer resources to them, just like the conversation today, that we offer resources to our community members, those that know people that are struggling to get them in the right direction, and those that are struggling to make sure that they pick up the phone call or know that we're there or other people are there for them. Our officers matter in these circumstances too, so that is what the administrative leave is for, to finalize the investigation and then to make sure that we have cared and supported for them so when they come back to work, they're ready to come back to work.
Is that a paid administrative leave?
That is a paid administrative leave.
Obviously, the investigation is still going on. I think you mentioned, or somebody had mentioned that, and in times like these where there's an officer-involved shooting or whatnot, there's also a debrief that happens, with the officers and with command staff and whatnot. When things like this happen, those debriefs probably are more important than ever to see maybe what went wrong and how things can be fixed so it doesn't happen again. Can you talk a little bit about how LPD is going to look into this situation and make sure that things like this don't happen again?
I don't know that we need to have that conversation today. Again, we just got done talking about how I'm going to spend a lot of time making sure that both officers involved are doing okay, and that we care about their mental health. They followed policy. I can't say that enough. They followed policy and it was missed. Those things are unfortunately going to happen from time to time. But at the end of the day, it is tragic again beyond measure. But he made a decision to move his hands in front of him and access the firearm that he had hidden on his body and take his own life.
Do you know about how long the investigation could take?
I don't have the answer to that. I think a couple more days. Again, we do very thorough investigations just to make sure that we have a full understanding, review of the body-worn camera, the cruiser video, the witness interviews, family, friends, people who knew him, understood him, and his experiences and how that played out with the interaction that we had with him.
Can we get the spelling of his name?
Oh, yes. Let me me get it here for you. His first name is Eleazar, and the last name is Oceguera, and he's 45 years old.
Can you see your LinkedIn resume?
Yes.
Are there any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello there, this is Danielle Shank in the 1011 Now streaming studio. Just getting a few notes ready here from this press conference that some of you have tuned into. I'm going to kind of recap what we learned here today and give you a better idea of the investigation into the death of a man who took his own life while in police custody. So the Lincoln Police Department did provide an update on the investigation into the death of a man who took his own life in police custody. I'm going to talk a little bit about the backstory here before we get into the updates from today. Just before 8 p.m. Sunday, officers responded to a call about a man experiencing a mental health crisis at a home near 54th and Meredith Streets, north of Pioneers Boulevard. According to LPD, the man, described as being in his 40s, was found trying to get into a home through a basement window. He was then taken into custody, searched, and placed in the back of a police cruiser. While officers interviewed witnesses, police say the man managed to move his hands to the front of his body and pull a gun from his waistband, shooting himself. He was then taken to the hospital where he later died. No officers were injured. The officer whose cruiser the man was in has been placed on administrative leave as required by department policy. The incident was captured on both body-worn and cruiser cameras. Now, today they did show some of the images from the body camera, but they are not releasing the video. They did identify the man, but we will not be in our article and moving forward due to this being a suicide. But police did walk us through the body camera images discussing the search of the man. They said that the handcuffs were double locked, according to Police Chief Michonne Morrow. Images do show the man maneuvering his hands to the front of his body before he grabbed a gun and turned it on himself. We will try to clip some of those images from the police briefing here today to show you in our article later today. And despite life-saving efforts, as we had mentioned, he did pass away. Now, Morrow says officers did follow policy, but unfortunately missed the gun while searching him, and they will not be releasing this video, the body camera video, due to it being a suicide. And Chief Morrow says, quite frankly, it would be unnecessary. We also asked LPD why they are the ones investigating this in-custody death instead of an outside agency. They said it's the result of an action of an individual, not the inaction of an officer. Now, through a partner with Centerpoint, we also asked about this. A mental health response coordinator will sometimes respond. Unfortunately, in this case, one did not. Chief Morrow says that's due to not having enough co-responders for the number of mental health crises that happen throughout the capital city. Now, Morrow also says they waited to release details until today because they were unavailable on Monday and Tuesday to provide more about this in-custody suicide. Morrow says knowing that, she provided more details in the press release Monday morning that was sent out at 3. Now, we did also ask why one officer is on leave if two were involved. Morrow says that officer who drove the cruiser, which we also mentioned earlier, is the one on leave, but they do care about the mental health of both following this tragic incident because this situation took a toll on them. Now, we will update the story with our article with these details, so stay tuned for that, including some of those body camera images. But for now, I will be signing off. Thank you.